Hello, it's Adedoyin Jaiyesimi here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the first module of the bite-sized comms course on executive communications. And in this module, as with all the previous bite-sized comms courses, I'm going to be talking to you about the fundamentals of executive communication. So let's dive into it. Definitions. I love definitions because it really does help us to know what exactly it is that we're doing. You need that clarity, and that clarity is very important. So executive communications is any form of communication that happens between an executive or leader and employees or with external stakeholders. So there's a way that we think executive communications is just what the executive posts on LinkedIn, on social media, what the executive is saying on media platforms, but it's actually more than that. Everything that your executive says falls under the pillar of executive communication, and this really comes to life within an organization when there is a change management process, there's transformation, there's things going on internally, and leadership has to steer and direct that ship, and everybody's looking to the CEO, to the business leaders for guidance, and so there has to be some thought and thoughtfulness that goes into that. So it covers everything that the executive says, does, and projects. So the silence of your executive, because you meet some executives, some CEOs, they just want to be silent, maybe because of their personality, but that in itself is also saying something. Everything that they project, if they step into a building and people are afraid and people are reticent, that is also communicating something. When executive communication is done well, you can actually leverage it to gain buy-in. You can use it to grow influence within the organization, within the industry, amongst regulators and key stakeholders within the particular sector that your organization operates it, and it helps in building a strong reputation. When you do executive communications well, there is a linkage to the overarching organizational reputation. And so what you're going to be learning from this model is that you're not going to be communicating on behalf of your executive in isolation to your organization. There has to be a correlation, right? Remember, we're talking about executive communications, and this in fact has an impact on what exactly is the content that this executive is going to project. Because look, a CEO, everything that CEO says is directly or indirectly imputed to the company, and so we have to get that very clear from the get-go. Good executive communications, it has a positive impact on reputation and the achievement of organizational goals. And you will have seen it in the news sometimes, where a CEO says something, does something, has a ripple effect on share price, has a ripple effect on maybe union engagement, for example. So executive communication is very, very serious, and this is why I really like to start with the fundamentals. So you have the big picture of what we're doing here. It's not just to be posting on LinkedIn, it's not just social media. There is a bigger goal that you need to achieve. So why do we have executive communications? Why exactly does this matter? I love this quote from James Hume. It says, "The art of communication is the language of leadership. Part of being a good leader requires you to be a good communicator, requires you to be able to pass on messaging that drives a particular action. You cannot be a good leader if you do not communicate, if you do not carry people along, if you do not carry your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders in the direction that you need them to go in." So executive communications is needed to, one, effectively implement your organization strategy. Your organization itself does not speak. It is the people who are inside that will speak on behalf of the organization. And the number one point man or woman is the CEO, the people in executive leadership. And then obviously you can now start talking about employee branding. But imagine if all the employees are saying great things about the organization or sending a particular message, do you know that what the CEO and the executives are saying also speaks volumes as well? And that's why you cannot afford to ignore executive communications. Second thing is, it promotes an organization's mission and vision to diverse audiences, because your executives are literally at the forefront and they are interfacing on different levels. You can use executive communications to properly engage stakeholders and get their buy-in. You can use it to raise funds from investors, for example. Again, strong leadership, strong communication from leadership brings confidence from investors, right? They're able to communicate the vision. They're able to communicate, this is where we're going. This is what we've done. This is our story. And that's usually with investors gives them a bit more confidence that, okay, the head of the leader is going in the right direction. I can jump on this ship. I can jump into this boat. Use it to nurture relationships with them. You can build strong and effective teams through strong and good executive communications, and you can use it to steer an organization successfully through the storms of a crisis. There was an example of an organization recently that the CEO had to step down because during a crisis, the CEO said absolutely the wrongest things. So a CEO and an executive can actually make or break reputation in times of crisis, which is why there has to be a plan. There has to be a strategy. You see, your executives, they are an important touch point, communication channel that we have to properly think about what exactly they are saying, when they are saying it, how they are saying it, what they are putting out there on their social media platforms, what is the messaging that they are saying. Is it in discord, or is it opposed or in opposition? That's what I'm looking for. Is it opposed or in opposition to what we are projecting from an organizational perspective? There really has to be a sync. And why it matters is that it really does enable leaders to clearly define their vision in a way that inspires engagement, generates rapport, builds trust, so important, and then encourages collaboration towards a common goal. So when you have an executive that has a message that is unclear, nobody is really sure about where this organization is going, nobody is really clear about what this executive is saying, or it is misinterpreted, you will find that there will be a ripple effect in terms of how the organizational strategy is implemented internally. Just imagine if the CEO comes at the beginning of the year and says, oh, this is the strategic direction, this is what we're doing, and salespeople, they have a different understanding. There's like miscommunication, like nobody understands this strategy. You can just imagine how there's going to be chaos when it comes to execution of that strategy. That would have an impact on team morale and then stakeholder at the same time. So again, executive communications is very, very important. And because of this, it is important, I hope by now you can really see that you need to think strategically about your executive's voice, because it is not just making posts on their behalf. It is about their image. It is about the messaging. What exactly are they saying? It is about the platforms. Where are they saying what they are saying? What is the engagement? And then the outcome. So let's break it down. Image. How is this executive perceived? And what impact does this have on the organization? And you have to really, you will find that when we go into the next model, when I'm talking about the strategy, you have to do an audit. What is the perception? Does this executive already have a bad reputation or a not so great reputation? Are people indifferent about this executive? Are people like, there's sometimes that some people will post something, a leader will post something on LinkedIn, and what they are posting is there's a dissonance with who they actually are, and people would be like, what's Yimu in plain English? Like, people just be like, what's this person saying? Because when you meet and interact with that executive, it does not match the persona that they have online. And that happens to a lot of executives because they're not the ones managing their social media platforms. So there's a mismatch between who they are and what they're posturing to be on social media. And so you have to really think about it. What is this image that this person currently has? How is this impacting on our organization, and where do we want to go from here? Because you can't just start managing social media for that person, managing LinkedIn, without having this information. What is the image now, and what is the image that we want to project? Second is the messaging, what the executive says and how the executive says it. So the executive cannot be taking one position on LinkedIn, they go on the media platform, they go to an event, and they're taking a totally different position. You're just going to confuse your audience, and what that will begin to do is that it will begin to breed mistrust. So imagine if I encounter an executive or your senior leader, maybe it's an in-person event, and they're saying one thing, and I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense, this is what this person is passionate about, and then I follow the person on LinkedIn and I'm saying, no, this thing that they're posting on LinkedIn is not tying into what I perceived or I thought that they were about. In my mind, I'm just thinking, okay, this person can't be trusted, it's just not funny at all. So you need to be clear. What is the message? What is this executive saying? And how do we make sure that that message is consistent across board? The next thing is engagement. How will this executive connect with key audiences and stakeholders? So let's break it down. You want thought leadership. You want to become more visible in the industry. Are we going to do virtual events, digital events? Are we going to have in-person events? Okay, we want to humanize this, our CEO. We want this CEO to connect more with people. Is he going to be visiting the field? Let's say, for example, you have factory workers. Is the CEO going to be visiting the shop floor every now and then? Are we going to have monthly CEO connects? What exactly is our engagement, or how will this CEO engage? And again, in the next few modules, I will tell you about whatever engagement strategy that you choose. You have to make sure it is aligned with who the executive is. So you don't want to take an executive that is largely introverted and then start putting them in situations where their social awkwardness will now begin to come out. It's not going to be good for your executive. You have to build them up to that, but I will talk more later on that. And the final thing is outcomes. What are the tangible results that can be tied back to effective executive communication? Because while more and more executive CEOs are really understanding the impact and importance of communications, a lot of them rather not. I still engage with those that be like, I'm not so sure. But it's the results that you get that ties back to that not to them alone, but to the organization, to the bigger business goals, that helps them to say, hey, actually, me as a communications channel at Touchpoint is actually having this ripple effect, positive ripple effect, because it is also possible that an executive's communication can have negative impact on the organizational reputation. That's when they're saying the wrongest thing, they're airing their mind, and the things that they're airing their mind on are things that maybe are socially and environmentally sensitive, and you're just like, oh my God, stop tweeting, collect your phone. But yeah, we have to really be clear on what the outcomes are. So these are some key takeaways. I really just wanted to set the fundamentals in this model so we can start reshaping our mind as to, hey, this executive communications, there is nothing haphazard about it. We really have to come to it with a strategic mindset. And so the number one takeaway is your executive's voice and platform is an important channel for communication and message dissemination. This is very, very true in time of crisis, in time when you need to rally and build solidarity. You find that having a strong executive communication, a CEO with a strong voice, would be an important touch point for that. For executive communications to be effective, it must be intentional, well planned, and strategically aligned to the organization's goals. This is not to make your executive popular. This is not, and it's not that it's bad for executive to be popular, but that's not the goal. The goal is, how does this impact on the organization? Because it's the organization that is employing you. It's not the CEO. So you always have to think about what is in the organization's best interest, and by extension, what is in the best interest of your executive. Everything an executive does or says communicates something, including their silence. Especially for those executives that say, oh, I'm media shy, I don't want to engage, I don't want to speak to that. It's okay, but let them know that your silence, these are the results. I mean, I love communicating with data. I love showing people, if you say you want to go down this path, this is what you should expect, right? It is important to stay on top of whatever narrative is around your executive. And in today's world, silence for an executive can be costly, very costly. There are times where, yes, it's okay to be silent, but there are times where it is not okay to be silent. And it's important that you point that out to your executive when you're trying to get buy-in for executive communication. So thank you for watching this first model. In the next model, we'll be doing a deep dive into how to develop your executive communications strategy. See you on the next model.